In Mounce chapter 28, we are dealing with aorist-stemmed participles, okay? And here, the word aorist is really defining the stem that's being used. It has nothing to do with time, remember? Once we're outside of the indicative, there is no such thing as absolute time with these non-indicative aorist forms. So we want to be very careful with that and not assume that because you see an aorist-stem on this particular participle that it must be past time, okay? It's a matter of relative time, much of the time. The real reason for the use of the aorist-stem is for aspect, not time. So remember, the present stem is used when the speaker wants to portray the action as being ongoing, in process. The unbounded view or portrayal of the action, whereas the perfective aspect, which uses the aorist-stem, is going to portray the action as bounded, the whole action, the complete action, or a snapshot of the action without any reference to whether it's in process, its beginning, or its end, its completion. None of that is in view with the aorist. Okay, so we have the matter of forming the aorist here on the handout. And remember, the aorist active and the aorist middle go hand in hand because they're both going to use the same stem, same principal part in your chart. Which principal part is the aorist active stem? It's going to be the third principal part, okay? Third principal part. But here is the important thing. It's going to be unaugmented. You will not see an augment on the aorist stem here, okay? So we just did an exercise a little while ago where we could tell the difference between the aorist and the future based on the augment, but that's only true of the indicative. We get into the to the participle formations, your aorist forms will not be augmented. So you're going to have to look at other things, okay? There is a tense formative here for the aorist participle, and when it's active or middle, and it's the sigma alpha. So there is a normal and familiar character for you. So we're happy for that. And then, of course, we have participle morphemes that come after. Now, notice that I'm not adding a connecting vowel between the sigma alpha and the nu tau. Why is that? Yeah, the alpha is a vowel already, so I don't need a connecting vowel here, okay? So I'm going to have nu tau if my participle is active, and meno mene if it's middle, okay? And then our case endings are going to follow the 3-1-3 declension pattern if they're active using nu tau, and middle will follow the 2-1-2 pattern using meno mene here. So what I've done on the handout is I've just given you the forms. You'll find these in Mounce's textbook just as well. But let's just take a look at these and we'll read them together, okay? So let's start with the masculine forms and look at lusas here. And let me explain what's happened here, and then we'll actually recite the forms. What have I got? I've got lusa, the aorist active stem, the sigma alpha, and then I should have had nu tau, and then the third declension case ending for masculine singular is normally a sigma. So where did lusas come from if I should have had lusans? What happened here? Yes, before a sigma, dentals like to fall out, right? Tau is a dental, and nu is a nasal dental. So both of these are going to say goodbye, and I'm going to be left with sas. Okay? So that's all that's happened here. Everything else in this this part is going to be fairly easy to identify. We get to the dative plural. Remember, sigma iota is my case ending. That sigma is going to interact with the nu tau in the same way, and I'm going to see that lost. All right, so repeat after me. Lusas, lusantas, lusanti, lusanta. And then looking at the plural forms, lusantes, lusanton, lusasi. My nu tau is missing before the sigma iota, and lusantas. All right, now feminine form. You'll notice, as we've seen with the present active participle, we have first declension forms here, and my new tau has been obscured through some phonetic process. We're still going to see the sigma alpha here. We're going to see a sigma, and then we're going to see the alpha eta stems of the first declension with their corresponding case endings, the first of which is nothing in the first declension nominative feminine singular. So everybody, lusasa, lusases, lusase, and lusasan. Plural forms, lusasai, lusason, lusasais, and lusasas. And then for our neuter forms, we're back to our third declension. Remember, we're following 3, 1, 3 pattern here. Everybody, lusan. So what happened here? This was sigma alpha, nu tau, and what is the neuter nominative singular third declension case ending? There is none, it's 0. And then, why is my tau not here on lusan? That's right, tau at the end of the word falls out. I call this throwing in the tau, right? And there it is, it's gone. So, lusan, we get our tau back. Lusantas, lusanti, lusan. And then our plural forms, everyone, lusanta, lusanton, lusasi, and lusanta. Now, notice that in the neuter, your nominative and accusatives are always identical to each other, right? And also notice that the masculine and the neuter always have what identical forms? Genitive and dative, right? Those are the same. And then these are the same here. Okay. You can count on it, take it to the bank. All right. What about the middle forms? These are not hard to identify either. We have the stem lu plus sa, but instead of the active forms, we're using the middle passive ones. So menos, mene, menon for our forms. Okay? You can very easily tell the difference between an aorist active participle and an aorist middle one. So, and by the way, you can translate these adverbially as we've been doing. So when you're using an aorist participle, instead of saying while, which is what the present participle will be used for when it's adverbial and temporal, it's contemporaneous with the verb's main action. You could say after. So after loosing, he did such and such. Okay? All right, so let's read the forms. Lusamenas, lusamenu, lusameno, and lusamenon. You see how we have these omicrons and omegas? Those are all characteristic of second declension, right? The alphas and etas, first declension, neuters, back to second declension. All right, plural forms, everybody. Lusamenoi, lusamenon, lusamenois, lusamenos. Feminine forms, lusamene, lusamenes, lusamene, lusamenein. And then plural forms, lusamenai, lusamenon, lusamenice, and lusamenas. Notice that you can tell the difference between the accusative plural feminine and the genitive singular, going all over the place here, genitive singular feminine by the eta compared to the alpha, right? See that? In the plurals, our etas always become alpha. All right, and then the neuter forms, everybody. Lusamenon, lusamenu, lusameno, lusamenon, lusamena. And let me get this on the screen here. Lusamenon, lusamenois, and lusamena. Okay, and we notice the same thing. Our nominative and accusative neuters are always identical to each other. The genitive and datives are identical to the masculine forms over here. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the aorist passive formations real quickly here. Okay? We're dealing here with first aorist passives, just like we were dealing with first aorist active and middles. First aorist actives and middles use sa for tense formative. Is the first aorist passive tense formative sa? No. In the indicative, it's theta eta, right? So we're going to see something similar here. So how do we form the first aorist passive participle? First thing is to use the aorist passive stem. But again, since we're not in the indicative mood here, they are unaugmented. And it's a different principal part. It's not the third principal part. It is the sixth principal part in your principal parts list. Okay? The tense formative is theta epsilon, not theta eta. So there's a slight change here, but if you're familiar with theta eta, theta epsilon is just a small step away. Look at the participle morpheme. I reserve nu tau for which forms, the active or the middle? I use them for the active. We're dealing with aorist passive here. You would have expected meno mene, right? But remember, aorist passive indicatives use which personal endings, the active or the middle passives? They use the active secondary endings. So aorist passives are always misbehaving this way. When you think they should use middle passive forms, they use active things instead. Okay? So we are going to use the active participle morpheme for these. They are going to look active, at least on that part. The theta eta or theta epsilon should be the clue that it's still aorist passive, okay? And because I'm using nu tau, we're looking at third declension forms here for the masculine and the neuter again. So let's take a look at the forms of luo. And again, I'll explain what happens here. The lu plus the theta epsilon plus the nu tau, and then the sigma for the nominative masculine singular third declension case ending. It should have been lu thence. Lu thence. Now you know what happens to the nu tau, right? Before sigma, dentals fall out. So I'm left with lu thes. So what's going to happen to this short epsilon to compensate for the loss of these consonants? It will compensatorily lengthen by becoming a diphthong, okay, and add the iota. So that's what's going on. When you don't have to do that, the epsilon will stay by itself in all the other forms, okay? So everybody, luthes, luthentas, luthenti, luthenta. And then the plural forms, luthentes, luthentone. And then here we get our compensatory lengthening because the nu tau fell out, luthesi and luthentas. Back to the feminine form, everybody. Luthesa, lutheses, luthese, luthesan. And the plural forms, luthesi, luthesone. That should be luthesone. Sorry, get rid of that accent there. Luthesis, luthesas. And then the neuter forms, luthen. It should have been luthent with no ending, right? And so the tau drops out at the end of the word. So luthen, luthentas, luthenti, luthen. And the plural forms, luthenta, luthentone, luthesi, luthenta. All right. So the last thing here, and they're just listed out for you. These are your forms to memorize, really. The genitive and the nominative forms in the active, middle, and passive. You can see the differences. Sas, santas versus samanas, samenu versus thes, thentas. Okay, and notice the aorist passive here is using the same endings that the aorist active is using, but have different tense formatives, okay? All right.